What's cooking, folks? Vermillion Phoenix here, and today we're jumping into some more Orcs Must Die 3. This time we are heading into the 11th scenario, which is going to be the Secret Fortress. Now we're doing something different. I know I usually like to bring the blunderbuss, and I should have actually brought it here, as it would have been useful for a couple of choice enemies. There's a couple of things I brought that weren't really that necessary, and probably could have been left out of the loadout, but we'll talk about that a little bit more as we get in. But we're going to be using the Bladestaff today, and we're going to reconfigure the Ice Amulet, so instead of the longer freeze duration, which I tend to use a lot after the most recent patch, which lowered the freeze duration on the Ice Amulet for balance reasons, for good reason. I mean, it was kind of long and it was very overpowered. We're going to switch to the area damage when you use the secondary or alt fire of the Ice Amulet, which is an AoE freeze, and it also gives you a damage over time effect that surrounds your hero when you're playing with them. After the freeze takes place, it travels with you, and that in combination with the Bladestaff basically turns you into effectively a damage over time DPS field. And it's important here because they like to send a large volume of enemies at you through spaces where traps just don't really clear as much of them as you need to get through this stage very safely. You have to otherwise utilize some very tight spaces to sort of instant kill enemies, or a lot of extremely powerful traps that have long or moderate cooldowns to deal with the heavier enemies. And altogether, that makes this a little tricky if you decide not to use this setup. So, use it. I mean, after all, this is something that I try to impart to people. Just if you're going for your first 5-star, just to get it out of the way, make sure you use something that's a little bit simpler, even if it's not the best for score, and then experiment afterwards. That way you have the achievement like sort of out of the way, and then you can sort of play around with other things that you want to do. Or at least that's the way that I like to approach it. That said, this is a barricade setup that you can use to have enemies path towards the center here and join the two lanes. It's super important that rather than placing that Brimstone back there, I should have actually placed a few more arrow walls beneath this area to make sure that we were catching more of the sappers. The sappers are a big issue in this particular level with this barricade setup, mainly because there's not anything in my loadout that guarantees that we can take them out before they get to those barricades. And alternatively, if you aren't going to build a ton of traps beneath you and you want everything to sort of just path up to the top before you really worry about dealing with damage, so you can get that area built first, you could float a little bit of coin, keep it in reserve, just in case they manage to get through any of those three sort of important barricades there, and replace them as soon as they get destroyed. The game really doesn't have anything that prevents you from doing that, and it's a legitimate strategy. That said, it shouldn't happen too often. I think I lose the barricades once here, and I get them replaced, and you should see that in just a couple of minutes. But in addition to that, the strength of the Bladestaff and the Ice Amulet freeze combo is very high here. While it won't take out the larger enemies, it's about on par with not getting them with headshots as far as how much damage they take. And because you can deal it to multiple enemies at once, and most of the heavy enemies will not have any sort of elemental damage resistance, it works pretty well, and it absolutely decimates any of the lighter enemies. Kobolds, light and medium orcs, they go down extremely fast. And the combination of the Bladestaff with its heal on primary attack and the healing trinket giving you the increased passive health regen is also extremely good at making sure that you can tank a lot of damage that normally would just destroy you. Now, one of the things that you could do that I haven't done when I set this area up is make sure that you have your Arcane Brimstone down earlier. What that'll do is it will increase the damage that the larger and healthier minions take when they get here, and that'll mean that you don't have to wait for multiple arrow walls to deal damage to them. You can take them out with a single arrow wall after they have taken the damage bonus proc from being hit with the Arcane element. So once you get this going, this is basically foolproof. Again, this is going to make sure that you just do those couple of things I mentioned before, in addition to conserving your mana specifically for the use of your AoE freeze on the Ice Amulet. So this is where the barricades get destroyed. I'm relatively close with being able to place another barricade here, which is why I'm not worried. We use the mana for the freeze, and then we drop another barricade right here. And that pretty much saves us. What you want to make sure you don't do is fight enemies near those barricades. I break line of sight with that Cyclops Shaman so that he starts to path around, because he won't shoot at you unless he can actually see you. And that's an important thing to remember with any ranged attackers in this game. Just make sure you don't have line of sight to them, especially when that line of sight is obscured by a barricade, because that both puts you in danger and your barricades, which is very dangerous if you're actually trying to win here. And you can see just how ridiculous the Ice Amulet and Bladestaff can be with dealing with a lot of enemies right there. Even though we had 3 heavy enemies, normally they're a bit tougher to deal with. But fire arrow walls and crowd control are just amazing in almost every situation in this game. Now, those barricades actually were a bad thing. I should have only reinforced the first 2 and left the last one where it was, because they weren't going to try to blow that one up. And I could have also placed 1 extra Brimstone right here, just in case any of the sappers that were coming from the top gate spread out a little bit, because sometimes they do that just a tad. And you'll see a lot of the kobolds kind of veering to the right and reaching our barricades before they turn around. So had I done that, I probably would have been a lot better off here and less worried about, floating coin for the cades. But, it's a learning experience either way. You can always critique things that you do afterwards if you look at them again, but it's not as easy to recognize it in the moment unless you just keep playing the level over and over again to refine the strategy. But, yeah, the more arrow walls you have, the easier this becomes, and it's also a very good idea if you want to use your ceiling ballista to place them at the very edge of this area here. I think this is... No, don't start doing this yet, but towards the back where you've reached the open area with all the ceiling, you can place your ballista there, and they'll hit the enemies that are rounding this corner, and also the ones that are coming down from these stairs. And because they will have already been hit with arcane damage from the ballista, if you are using the arcane ballista damage upgrade, then the fire arrow walls will also deal even more damage to them, making it even better. So stacking that arcane debuff and dealing damage of another element is super strong, and always has been, and it's a good idea just to make use of that so that your workload as a player gets a little bit lighter dealing the damage directly. And this is an example of a time when I probably should have used the Ice Amulet's AoE and just did not. It uses about half your mana easily, and that's a bit expensive, but at the same time, faster clear is a faster clear. And for the most part, that's pretty much it. Like, this level really gives you its hardest pushes at the very beginning, and that's something that's been kind of consistent with the level design in Orcs Must Die 3. There's nothing that really wows you after about halfway through the normal maps, which I think is on purpose. Like, it plays a lot like how the more difficult levels used to in Orcs Must Die Unchained, where the struggle wasn't really in having a good setup for most of the levels, but in being able to manage your early coin. And understanding where to best put that coin and when you have very little of it is super important. especially with the strength of the traps in this game. Just about everything is strong, if not just nearly overpowered. And you can see that with the cheap cost of the arrow wall and the ridiculous amount of damage that it's able to put out at any given time. I think the arrow wall in some cases will one-shot some of the heaviest enemies in the game if they are stuck in front of it and take all 3 shots. So it's just making sure that you get that coin in the right place at the right time, you know, maximize its use. And with the heavy enemies that are coming through, because as far as I'm aware, just about all of them are weak to fire, it's just a good idea. The armored ones, specifically the armored ogres, are a little bit weaker to lightning, but lightning traps cost so much more that that bonus weakness, so to speak, really doesn't even matter. And I'm not sure if that's just because of the way that well, no, that's not true. That's not true. It matters with certain traps. It's just that with the situation with the way that the wall traps are set up in this game, the wall charger, I'm not sure, really has a significant place in the game other than dealing with enemies in bottlenecks. And I guess that's his niche. Like, the arrow wall doesn't fill the same niche as it. It just happens to be strong and have more range, which makes it, I guess, the more universal trap to use. But when you get that wall charger in just the right place, it is definitely chef's kiss with the way that it can deal damage. And I say that literally having used it in previous videos where it was really nice. You can see, you know, big combo numbers, or at least just multiple combo numbers showing up at the same time when it takes out a large number of enemies. And it's pretty to look at. But this is pretty much done here. Again, you know, once you have this set up, it doesn't really look like anything else is happening. It's super important, and this guy's about to just get blown up from arrow walls. Either way, let me know how you guys have been dealing with the Secret Fortress. Do you think it's any different than the previous levels? Have you had any troubles with it? And what do you think of the game up to this point? I think it's been relatively simple, though that changes definitely once we get to the very last couple of stages. But, you know, we'll talk about those when we get there. Either way, thank you guys for tuning in to my videos. Ugh, got a little bit tongue-tied there. If you watch these through to the end, I sincerely appreciate it. Feel free to drop me a like if you enjoyed it. If not, you can tell me why. And if there's anything else that you want to see about the game or any other games, there'll be more stuff coming to the channel other than Orcs soon. I'm just working on getting all of that produced now. But, you know, drop me a line. Either way, feel free to follow me over at twitch.tv/VermillionPhoenix if you want to see me live. That's where I'm doing most of my live stuff now. And yeah, until next time, whether it's in a video or in a stream, as always, take care of yourselves and have a good one, folks. Peace.